Hi. I've been looking forward to making this, which I believe will be my last statement about this electoral cycle, uh, perhaps my last. And I thought I would be making it much sooner, but the events of the last several weeks have postponed my being able to make this statement until now, when it looks fairly certain that we will, in fact, have a Biden Harris transition. And what I'd like to talk about today is what I'm hoping for out of that transition, what I'm hoping for that new administration to do. And I'm not going to talk about, specific policy items like how to handle vaccines or something of that sort. I'm going to talk about what I think needs to be done in terms of bringing together the nation, finding common ground. And the first thing I think that the Biden-Harris administration needs to do is to listen to the people who didn't vote for them. Whether or not you think that there's how the election counting went, anybody can agree that in looking at the electoral map, there is a huge swath of red states right in the middle of the country. And that isn't unique to this transition. That isn't unique to Biden Harris versus Trump. It was true when Trump ran against Hillary Clinton. It was true when Obama ran against McCain. It was true, race basically, when Clinton ran against Bush and when Bush ran against Gore. So for as long as we can remember, the large Midwest, large agricultural and industrial center of the country has very largely, to one extent or another, but predominantly gone for the Republicans. Now, that has to be in large measure because that part of the country, a very important middle part of the country, feels that somehow their concerns have not been met and are not being met by Democrats. Now, why is that? Well, one way to find out, I think, would be to really formally listen to them. We can come up with theories. We believe that it has something to do with their prejudice against the coastal elites, or having to do with the way income is distributed, or having to do with celebration of certain prime family values. But the fact is, until Democrats are really listening to those people and showing that they are listening, they're going to be continually rejected. Maybe that's just inevitable, but I believe it's now an opportunity, and it is incumbent upon the incoming administration to not only hear and listen to what is being said, which is sometimes very painful and sometimes seems, difficult to swallow, but to hear it, listen to it, and to make a point that they're listening to it. Now, I get it. It's difficult to listen to Fox News for those of us from the left. It's probably difficult to listen to MSNBC to those from the right. I would argue that there's a difference in why it's difficult. But without actually making the effort to be heard and to hear, without making the effort to know, to let people know they are being heard, it's very difficult to see how we are going to find a way to come together. So my suggestion and hope would be that the incoming administration find a way to formally set up listening tours. In the age of COVID, that's probably difficult in person, but it wouldn't be difficult to have, limited number of people in every red state's cities and towns come into central gathering places with appropriate social distancing and talk, let's say, through Zoom or whatever technology is available. Not ask questions like they do in an election cycle itself, but just to say, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, these are my concerns which you have not addressed, which Democrats have not traditionally addressed. That may not change what the incoming administration does. It may be that the gulfs really are there and that there are differences in opinions and differences in perspectives that can't be bridged just by listening. But without both listening to the opposite point of view, showing that you are understanding it, and demonstrating to those people that you have heard their concerns, the possibility of a real reconciliation is small. And this would be the time, this would be the opportunity. Now, secondly, there is a temptation on the part of the incoming administration, and there's a temptation on those of us who have supported it to exact revenge for what many people think has been lawlessness and really misbehavior on the part of the outgoing administration. And one does not have to look far to see calls for revenge. In my opinion, as satisfactory as emotionally as that might be, the notion of putting people in jail, that will not help anyone. In a much more brutal period in another country where there had been real crimes, torture and revolution and explosion and murder, in South Africa, when the majority African population took control with Nelson Mandela as president, they did not seek revenge. They sought truth and reconciliation. Those who had tortured and those who had exploded sat down and told each other what they had done, why they had done it, and the country moved on together. Now, I suspect there probably are some real crimes that have been committed that deserve punishment, but I think most of the things that people are looking for to get revenge for were political actions. So perhaps wrong political actions, but each side sees the other as if having done something criminal and tries to criminalize the other. That is not going to be in anybody's best interest. I would like to see a method by which this nation can move forward in a truth and reconciliation without revenge. Now, how to do that? I don't know. We work in a certain court, litigious and adversarial justice system. However, it would be possible to convene a presidential commission, a blue panel, blue ribbon commission, made up of well-respected jurors and leaders of both parties, perhaps, former presidents, former attorneys general, retired Supreme Court justices, former heads of FBI, former cabinet members, perhaps a dozen men and women who are known for their fairness, who could then, using the resources available to the instruments of government, investigate, discuss, review the questions and issues that have gone back before. Investigate whether there were really conspiracies. Investigate conspiracy theories. I don't mean to punish anybody, not to exact revenge, but so that we all know what is true and what is not true, and how people started to believe what was true when it was not true. I think that would not only satisfy some reconciliation, but it could form sort of a sense of how to deal going forward with the kinds of misinformation, rumors, and that have covered and surrounded this election, the information going into the election, and the counting of the votes after the election. We will never really be able to go forward together unless we come back to arriving at some shared view of what really is going on. And in a sense, if we do, then this bolus of misinformation that's gone on over the last several years could form as a vaccine, which would make our body politic even stronger. We're talking about vaccines now. A vaccine is a little tiny part of an organism that goes into a body, not enough to kill it, but enough to let that body know, oh, I need to develop my protections, my natural immunity against this onslaught. Well, we've had an onslaught of true disinformation, of true dystopian misinformation, of lies. Which side has the lies? Well, that's going to require some investigation. But if one side is believing that Russia is running the election and the other side is believing that the American government is spying on its citizens, if one side is believing that there are mysterious laptops that would contain the secret of great perfidy, and the other side is believing that the electoral machines are programmed to do damage, it's very difficult to move forward from that. Those issues and all of these things could actually be looked at, and probably within the course of a year, some sort of presidential or national white paper review, finding, whatever you want to call it, could be produced, which would bring us back to a common starting point. Not everybody would believe it. There are intractable conspiracy theorists out there, but enough people would be, brought to see some common basis of truth. At least I hope so, and we would have a chance. So not revenge, not putting anybody in jail, but truth and reconciliation, finding out from everybody what really happened. Third, we'll never really be able to move together if we don't have some sort of agreed upon facts. I'm old enough to remember the Vietnam War, in which the positions of one side about what we should be doing and what was right or wrong could not have been more diametrically opposed from the other. And that was a truly violent time. We think of today's election as violent. That was nothing next to the Vietnam protests. College students were being shot down on campuses. It was a very violent time, and opinions and thoughts and feelings were very high. But there was a common belief in certain facts. I mean, everybody had a different opinion about the Vietnam War, but nobody thought it was a hoax that people were dying in it. Nobody thought that the soldiers should not be wearing their helmets. So, there was difference of opinion, but difference of opinion based on certain agreed upon facts. And there were sources in which, people could, to a large extent, almost completely trust the objectivity of the facts. That's completely different now. One network tells things that are completely different than what another network tells about the same things. It's not only just covering it from a different slant point, it's different sets of facts. It will be very difficult for us to come together as a nation without a shared set of facts. Now, how could we do that? Well, I mean, I'm not naive enough not to know that news is being packaged as a commodity, therefore being sold to those people who want a particular flavor of news. That's the business model of the major networks. But surely we could convene some sort of commission, some sort of investigatory panel, some sort of way for the responsible members of all of the news organizations to sit down and agree to certain kinds of rules of the road, which are in the best interest of the country. Yes, it's very easy to sell really salacious bits of material from one standpoint, but if they're really wrong, or if they really have no basis in fact, you're not helping anybody by doing it. I believe that the purveyors of news, all of them, have some stake in a common society, in a decently run common society, and may be willing to begin such a dialogue. Where it would go, who knows, but it's a dialogue that must be started. Finally, and this I think is more self-serving from the standpoint of the Democrats, I don't believe that the Democratic Party, or if you want to call it the left, has ever really done a great job of articulating what its basic principles are with regard to economic policy. The reason Democrats fall into the trap of being labeled as socialists and communists, and that gets to be a broad, tarry brush with which they get painted, is because nobody has really made the effort, or at least has not been broad enough effort, to explain what the basic concepts are. So that, on one end of the spectrum, there's quote unquote unbridled capitalism, which we have not had for well over 100 years. On the other hand of the other end of the spectrum, people talk about communism. I mean, our current president labeled the incoming president as a communist. People haven't talked about that for decades, but do we really know what those terms mean? I don't believe that there is a common understanding of what any of those terms mean. And I think the fault of that, in large measure, is that the Democratic Party have not really articulated what are the issues. What differentiates a free market economy with a social network, with a free market economy with a safety network? Is the word I'm looking for. A free market economy with a safety network. Nobody has differentiated that from socialism, from social democracy, from democratic socialism. We really haven't articulated why a progressive tax structure is useful, or whether it's useful, or what are the alternatives. So that because there isn't a really clear vision of, or even a clear understanding of what the economic, financial, policy related issues are, Democrats are easy prey for those who want to label them as socialist communisms and in general bad actors. I believe it would be worth the while of an incoming administration, either through its president and vice president, or through its Treasury Secretary to articulate, not for the market people, not for the economists, not even for those people who've spent their lives studying policy, but for everyone, for those people who live in the red states and believe that, Joe Biden is a communist, to articulate what is communism, what do we mean by that, so that going forward, those labels will be more difficult to tar your opponents with. People may still ultimately say, listen, I don't believe that a free market economy with a social safety net and a progressive tax structure is what I want, but at least they should know that that's not communism. And that burden, I think, is on the Democrats. I mean, it's very easy to say that it's on the people who accuse you of malfeasance without having articulated what it is you're really doing. That educational component, that outreach component, that articulation component has, in my opinion, never been properly done by any Democratic administration, and I think it's high time. So, I mean, that's basically my position. I've said from the beginning that I want the center to hold. I am a centrist Democrat. I believe that a moderate course is right, and I don't believe that revenge is going to help us. So I think we need to talk to, but I think more importantly, we need to listen to those who did not vote for the Democrats. I think we have to find a way of eliciting real truth and reconciling and not seeking revenge and imprisonment of those who have committed, whether or not we believe they are political crimes, of those who have behaved in a way that we find not to our liking. We need to articulate to everybody why it was that. That won't be helped by just making ourselves the party of revenge. I think we need to find a way to establish a form of common truth. And think we need to use that form of common truth to better articulate what left-leaning politics, middle left-leaning politics really is all about. So I'm saying this today, the day that the Electoral College should be finally certifying that Joe Biden is the incoming president, barring any truly catastrophic military/totalitarian efforts on the other side. I believe that will be the case. And this is the first day that I've been pretty convinced that's true. So this is really my last, or perhaps I'll have one more statement about this election that I've spent many, many months working on. And I hope it has had some effect on those who've heard what I've had to say. And again, I thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Good night.